Hi class, Professor Seeger reporting for duty. In this video I'll be going over a couple ways reading drama is different than reading other sorts of literature. To understand many of its conventions, we will need to look at a brief overview of its long history. We will go over different critical terms and a couple strategies to deal with the various types of plays you will be encountering. Understand, examining drama, especially Shakespeare, is the culmination of what we have learned in this class so far. What is contained in this lecture is in addition to all the other lectures that have preceded it. Just saying. So, at this point in the program, please remove yourself from all distractions. Make sure you have a pen and a pad of paper to take notes during the presentation. If I go too quickly, I insist you stop and rewind until I make sense. Enjoy! Plays, or dramas, are primarily narrative and are composed of dialogue presented in a specific setting by actors who move and interact with one another according to the scenes they perform. Plays have many qualities they share with both fiction and poetry. Like fiction, plays contain plot, setting, characters, point of view, etc. But like poetry, they are meant to be performed out loud and have strong concerns about voice, tone, and language. Drama, in order to be experienced properly, has a couple more steps to it than other forms of literature. In fact, ideally, plays originally were not meant to be read by the masses at all, but experienced sitting in a theater with other spectators, watching a performance by live actors. The experience also includes the visual aspects of stage setting, of various qualities, the specific spacing and architecture of the theater, the actors, the rest of the audience, and so on. The process of creating and analyzing this process can all be reduced to three essential parts: the script or text, the director, and the actor collaborate to create an audience member's experience. Each element requires a sequential coding and decoding of the play, meaning the playwright encodes the play with language, images, symbols, themes, etc. The director chooses which parts of the play to change, keep, or get rid of altogether. Consider the fact that The Lion King is a version of Hamlet. Of course, there are a few things that Disney recodes, so it is friendly to all viewers. Lastly, the actor has to interpret the character, situation, and the lines being read. Please keep in mind, critics always value the script as the purest form of the play, the source, if you will. Any analysis that includes a performance must reference the script and deviations from that script. As I mentioned last frame, it's actually strange to be reading a play. It's not intended to be read. It's supposed to be performed live. A close approximation is watching a movie or video version of a play. One advantage and disadvantage of reading is that we create our own actors in our head. One reason to read the play before the movie. We rely on no interpretation but our own. Consider this. Anyone who has read the Harry Potter books after they watch the movies can't help but imagine Daniel Radcliffe at the title role. This makes things easier to imagine, but it also limits our own participation in the process. With your first reading, imagine you are a producer or director looking for a script. Who do you imagine casting? Why? Ideally, we would be watching these plays in a theater, with a crowd and live actors, which means that even if we watch the same play for a week in a row, each performance might have significant differences, and even different casting. Not only that, but different directors, or dramaturgists, yeah, that's a word, look it up, interpret the script differently. Different actors interpret a role differently. Set designers interpret lighting differently. All sorts of things can change a play's performance. And we haven't even thought about reimaginings of plays that change time period, location, or take any number of different points of view. Traditionally, these three unities are principles of good drama, and many plays still follow them. In fact, no play, no matter how experimental, will break one of these unities lightly. Collectively, They state that a play must represent a single series of interrelated actions that take place within 24 hours in a single location, and they should be either entirely serious or entirely funny, comedy or tragedy. Shakespeare, thank goodness, invented the tragicomedy and broke all the rules. All plays have these three unities in mind, though, so we need to keep them in mind as well. Long before Christianity, Aristotle created the criteria to determine the quality of a play. This criteria reveals what the ancient Greeks valued most in their entertainment. Since these elements are translated from ancient Greek, however, there is some variation in their wording. Number 1. Action or plot, also known as fable. This element is closely related to the unity of action. The best dramas are imitations of reality, and action in a play must be linked together through 1. Probability, and 2. Necessity. Typically, plots follow the Freytag pyramid of story development, starting with exposition, then developing the plot through various interactions and complications up until the climax. Then, we typically move into the falling action and the conclusion very quickly. 2. Character. Character personalities develop through action and language or thought. Consider a character's purpose in a play. Consider the various roles a character might play, such as protagonist, antagonist, character foil, stock character, etc., and what characterizes these people as such. How does each character reveal their personality? These questions, of course, lead to number 3, thought, also known as theme. Thought is vital, especially for Aristotle, because that is how the lesson of the play is communicated, through various strategies such as dialogue, monologue, asides, or soliloquies. 4. Language, also known as diction, or sometimes dialogue. Language should hint at a character's background through various types of diction appropriate for the situation, and it should determine a character's tone, which is important for how the actor communicates the character's language. This is why in Shakespeare all the important or noble characters spoke in blank verse, while the poor would speak in prose. Look for these subtle hints. Look for wordplay, especially in Shakespeare. Think connotation. Think denotation. 5. Song and dance, also known as melody or rhythm. Specifically in Greek plays, the chorus would reiterate major themes of the previous scene, usually with a song and dance routine. In more modern contexts, this includes any background music or sound effects. Using the term rhythm, however, seems to imply this element also includes an attention to general pacing of dialogue. This is often combined these days with spectacle. 6. Spectacle, or visual excess, was considered the least important aspect of a play for Aristotle. Often, Greek playwrights did not show a gruesome death or a fight scene on stage. In Oedipus Rex, all the exciting stuff happens off stage. Oedipus puts his eyes out, his mother kills herself, Oedipus solves the riddle of the Sphinx. Part of the reason is practicality. In such a large stage, special effects are hard to see, and also the special effects were said to distract from other more artistic elements. This changed somewhat with Shakespeare. Now, consider what is important in the majority of movies today. How has drama changed throughout the centuries? When information is handed to us, it's most commonly in the form of exposition, a means of setting up the situation. Again, we've seen this word before as part of our discussion of fiction. It's the beginning part of a standard story arc, and usually includes background information, description of characters, etc., whatever we might need to know before the action of the plot begins. This is usually in italics before the play. Sometimes this is minimal, forcing the reader or director to use their imaginations. Sometimes this is clunky. Sometimes exposition is revealed through individual characters speaking to the audience. There comes a time in every play when a character just needs to get something off his or her chest, tell some backstory, or speak directly to the audience. There are typically two ways this is done in a play, through monologues and asides. Monologues are when a character gets to ranting to other characters. This is different than a soliloquy in that a monologue is directed at a character in a play, whereas a soliloquy is a type of dramatic monologue directed at nobody. In a play, a soliloquy is a device that allows the audience to hear a character's inner thoughts. Since there isn't a narrator to reach into a character's thoughts, through soliloquies we hear what a character would usually never tell anyone else. These soliloquies are vital to plays because many of the more traditional narrative conventions are not available. Asides are when a character speaks directly to the audience without being heard by any other characters, often to show his or her inner thoughts, or to tell the audience a secret. Asides tend to be fairly brief, as opposed to a soliloquy, which tends to be much longer and more dramatic. A tragedy is a play that portrays a serious conflict between human beings and some superior, overwhelming force, like fate, or destiny, or human nature, or, well, it could be a lot of things, but it always ends badly. There is also a series of requirements for something to be a true or classic tragedy. 1. Tragedy only befalls on the innocent. This means that if you're a bad person, it's not really tragic. 2. Tragedy usually results from a reversal of fortune, happy to sad, high to low. This means that a tragic hero must start out high on the hog, just so that he can fall farther. Sometimes this reversal coincides with a tragic irony. Things don't play out as intended or expected. 3. A weakness in the protagonist that brings about this reversal is their tragic flaw. In Greek tragedy, and modern tragedies as well, this flaw is often hubris, or pride, or overwhelming confidence. 4. Tragedies have a very serious tone and very lofty language. 5. Tragedies arouse pity or fear at their end, and a sort of catharsis, a sense of relief that our lives aren't nearly as bad as those of the characters on stage. Traditionally, the term comedy doesn't necessarily mean a play is funny, but that its trajectory is the opposite of tragedy. Someone, through common sense and resilience, or pure dumb luck, finds success and happiness. Comedy also has its own set of requirements. Aristotle liked to write rules, didn't he? 1. Comedy results from a reversal of fortune, just the opposite reversal from tragedy. Comedies go from sad or poor to happy or rich. 2. People do get into trouble sometimes, but these problems are not grand and lofty, but common. Therefore, they don't inspire pity or sorrow. Instead, we laugh. 3. A comedy isn't as noble or lofty as tragedy in tone, diction, or theme. 4. A comedy inspires hope. It is sometimes good to categorize the different types of comedy so that we might understand their conventions and traditions better. Satiric comedies criticize human weaknesses, hypocrisies, and all those other less than virtuous things that make us human. Satires are always laughing at people, often specific people, who are typically hypocrites of some sort. High comedies are smart. They rely on language, wittiness, and insightful truths about human nature. Oscar Wilde was the best at this. He said, "I can resist anything except temptation." Think about it. When we watch or read high comedies, we laugh from our brain because we have gotten the wordplay and feel clever. Low comedies, on the other hand, are not so smart, but they still seem to get a lot of laughs. However, our brain has nothing to do with it. With low comedy, we are usually laughing from our gut. These plays and movies are full of coarse bodily humor, i.e., fart jokes. Often these low comedies rely on reaction instead of mental interaction. Slapstick comedies are similar to low comedy, but instead of crass attention to the body, slapstick uses the physical situations to show characters losing their dignity. Think slipping on a banana peel or getting a pie in the face. Think Jackass or The Three Stooges. Romantic comedies, of course, center on the anxieties and failings related to love. This means that most of the comedy is relationship-based, and this is often gender-based. Remember, these relationships don't have to be ha-ha funny to be comedies. There is an over 2,000-year history to drama, its conventions, its place in society, and the subject matter it was able to convey. It is good to have a sense of this history, because often dramaturgists are aware of these conventions and subtly commenting on them, either by breaking the conventions outright or by twisting them into something newish. If you do not know the basic history of drama, you will miss all of this subtext. It's like watching the latest remake of Star Wars without being aware of the other movies in the franchise. In 500 BC Athens, Sophocles was the man. He won his first victory in the Dionysian dramatic festival in 468 BC. This began a career wherein Sophocles wrote 123 dramas for the festivals. Sophocles won perhaps as many as 24 victories. That's a lot. Most of these festivals, and most of the plays presented, were performed at the Theater of Dionysus in Athens. It isn't much different than the festival performance stages we know from today. As you can see from this diagram, the theater held up to 20,000 people. This was mass entertainment, education, and in cultural doctrination. These plays, not so subtly, taught the audience important lessons that would help them participate in Greek culture. All the performance is done on the front stage before the building. The chorus would be around the outer circle, reiterating the messages and basic plot of what had just happened. Of course, this reiteration was necessary due to the enormous nature of the stage and audience, who were mostly illiterate. Because there were so many audience members, actors wore large masks, or personas, that were often highly stylized, like the comedy and tragedy masks at the beginning of this lecture. There were usually only 3 actors who changed and switched the masks between episodes, or what later became acts and scenes. Greek plays always had a chorus, a group of singers who served at times as an outside narrator, providing exposition, introductions, character notes, offstage summary, and comments on the action taking place. In modern plays, it's usually a single character who serves this purpose, if there's anyone at all performing this role. Plays always begin with a prologue from the chorus. The prologue introduces the play, provides background or expository information, and readies the audience for the action to take place. They ended with an epilogue, or final note, and sometimes apology for the play. These traditions were alive from 500 BC to the 1600s, and are still a part of contemporary theater traditions. Even movies employ these classical conventions at times. Here are several shots of the Globe Theater. Notice technologically how much of an advancement this is from the Greek theater. The play was indoors, so weather wasn't in opposition. There was balcony seating for the rich and royalty, while the poor stunk up the floor around the stage. Which is why the rich would pay so much to sit in the balcony, to be above the smell. Also, there were multiple floors, so there could be multiple sets. Therefore, the unity of place was much easier to break for Shakespeare, and he did it, constantly. Moving into the 20th century, playwrights changed their sensibilities, and what constituted a good play also changed. In classic plays like Death of a Salesman, Trifles, and The Dollhouse, the playwrights valued realism and worked to maintain that fourth wall. The fourth wall, by the way, is the imaginary one-way mirror between the characters on stage and the audience. The theory is that the characters do not know the audience exists. Therefore, such dramatic conventions as asides and soliloquies directly addressing the audience were not used. The plays also lost their loftiness. No longer were the audiences interested in kings and generals and lords. The characters were more socially varied. Much of modern theater focuses on realism, or an attempt to mimic real life, which means that not only are sets inspired by real life, but so are situations. The chorus and the chorus's duties are limited. Realism goes hand in hand with another literary convention, naturalism, which has little to do with the outdoors, but with a realism that deals with the unpleasant realities of life. Andre's Mother is a modern play that is influenced by realism and naturalism, but it still follows those three traditional unities of action, time, and place. Now, since we aren't all as rich as Rockefellers, and we don't live in a big city, we will be approximating the theater experience by watching film or video versions of the plays for this class. The interesting part of this is that each director has a different angle to a particular play, and sometimes their interpretations of another person's interpretations might clash. There is no better example for this than Hamlet, which has been done in theater playhouses for over 400 years, each time with a different director and a different cast. Then there are the movie adaptations, which can get pretty crazy. There's Hamlet in space, in Japan, with ninjas and samurais. As a cowboy, Hamlet from the point of view of minor characters, especially Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Hamlet in Nazi Germany, Hamlet with vampires. Wait, vampires? Yep, vampires. There is even Hamlet musicals, Hamlet cartoons, Hamlet 2, and so on. Not all of them are good adaptations, but each version does something different to the play, and each director is making several interpretations about relationships between characters and what is important in the play. It is often interesting and illuminating if you compare one of these versions with the original script. Sometimes these comparisons can reveal interesting themes and connections in both texts you didn't realize before. But always remember that the original written script is what you need to privilege in your analysis. Diversions can be valuable and interesting, but they are still diversions from the original. When you're writing about drama, especially in relation to film, you have more options than with other genres. Although Hollywood does base movies on books a lot, so I get... Anyway, you have option 1. You might choose to ignore any film or theater adaptations and just look at the script. Using your imagination and attention to detail, determine meaning and tone, as well as larger elements and themes. Or option 2, through infinity. You might analyze an adaptation of a play. Of course, if you choose to write about an adaptation, you must always remember that you must discuss and cite both the written play and the movie. That's right, you must have a work cited for both primary sources. And don't neglect the script. This implies that this is chiefly a comparison-contrast paper. Therefore, the first thing you do is read the play and understand it relatively well. Then, you watch the adaptation with a series of probing questions. What choices are being made by the director, by the various actors? What did the director leave out or add? What was switched around chronologically? The list goes on. And remember, with each question, you must consider the effect of these decisions on the central themes of both texts. You might also consider the changes in setting or the adding of special effects. So now you have some background on drama and how it changed throughout history, some terminology to help you break down the components of plays. You have some questions to ask to get you started analyzing plays and film versions of plays. Now get to reading, watching, and writing. In that order.